Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at the model that shows the concrete structure with the pedestals added. We're going to begin laying in the structural steel beams. From previous work, we already have the grids laid out. In Revit, it's important to note that columns by default, if they are structural, are laid in from an upper level down to a lower level. And if you hover over the icon, you'll be able to pick up information about installing the columns. For this type of work, it's good practice to pull the Properties menu out to the side and dock it. As you're working with structural steel, the number of properties that you need to review are rather notable. And if you have it docked to the side, you can see the whole list. And keeping your project browser so that you can easily navigate. One of the things we're going to go in here is I want to verify the correct families are loaded. I'm going to come down to Structural, Columns, W shapes, and just to verify we have the correct ones loaded, I'm going to delete out this section and come in, select the column tool, and load what is called a family. This is the library definition for the column element, and I'm going to, it should default US Imperial. If you're working in metric, you would navigate to those libraries, and we're going to look at structural column, steel, and I want you in particular to go to AISC 14.1 library. This is in the 2016 version of the software. And we're going to load in wide flanges. And it's important to note that a family for a column is quite different than a family for a beam. Both will be the same shape name, but they're two different families. And so for right now, for columns, we're going to load in a W10 by 33. Now that that's loaded, we can begin placing. One way to place is to simply select a grid intersection and the columns will be placed. And by hitting the space bar, I can rotate the direction that the column goes. I'm going to hit place it there. This next one I'm going to hit space bar twice. This one I'm going to hit space bar once. I hover over it, and then it places it at an angle. Now for this particular project, I'm going to hit escape twice, select these columns and delete them. And all this video is doing right now is just showing some different options for how to place columns. And while we work on these, I want to point out that in the background it is developing these columns. And I'm going to notice that the level of this column goes from the first deck level to the landing, and what I really want that column to do is go down to the top of pedestal. And so I'm going to right click to move all of them at once. I'm going to select all instances in visible view and then set all of these to go down to the pedestal. They extend down. So what I'm highlighting here is that within Revit, you're really working, even though you're in a 2D view, you're working on all levels. So another way to place columns, I'm going to take all of these columns and delete them. Another way is that if I take the column command, I can begin doing at grid lines, and with this I can simply highlight all the grid lines at once and place them all at once. And I'm going to hit escape twice, right click, I'm going to select all the instances in the view, and I'm going to pick all of their base elevations and set them to the top of pedestal. I'm going to accept those. If I note in the 3D view, by just lassoing them all across the project, I've added in some columns that I did not need, so I'm going to delete those. I also notice that some of these columns are higher than needed, but this would be the first pass at adding the columns, and we will show how you can easily modify and work with the structural design as you begin. But Revit has some very rapid tools for framing structure to a level of development of 300. That concludes this brief overview of columns.